Today, we're going to show you how we fix the most oversimplified tool on the internet, a cost of living analysis. When you're moving from one area to another, cost of living is normally very different. And I don't claim to be an expert on every single area, but there is differences in housing, energy costs, food that vary region to region, city to city. Real estate is one of the biggest drivers of these differences. And where a lot of the calculators get it way wrong is they don't weight it and they don't weight things to your situation. So here at First Principles, we fix that. We're going to give you a tour of our market feasibility analysis. So show how feasible it is to move from one market to another, what salary you might need, if it's going to be a better standard of living than you're used to or a lower standard of living. So let's just throw in a few examples here just to really walk through it. 120,000. You might make more, you might make less, but these are your numbers. And put that in here. We've got Origin metro area. One area that I know pretty well is Peoria. That's actually where my kids were born in a hospital there. We were living in Bloomington at the time, but that's going to be in the metro statistical area of Peoria. And let's say you go to Austin. Austin's an interesting spot and actually really revealed a lot of weaknesses with these calculators because Texas is overall fairly cheap to live. If you look over here, housing and shelter, wow, moving from Peoria to Austin, you're not almost double. The average is up about 30%, or this isn't an average, this is a weighted average, and we'll get more to that in a second. We've got other services, cheaper in Austin, from gas to getting your windows cleaned, to getting your oil changed, really anything, any services there, car wash. Car guy might be a little stuck on there right now, but most services are going to be cheaper in Austin than they are in Peoria, Illinois. The Midwest is not necessarily known for being the most cost effective for certain things like that. Same thing with primary utilities, in the land of oil and no climate change or whatever they think. I should cut that. Primary utilities. So in the land where there's oil everywhere, just spurting out of the ground, I think I had only spent very little time in Texas. I know they like their oil, but it's actually a lot cheaper for primary utilities there because of that. Tangible goods, there's virtually no difference. It's going to be your probably least variable expense is tangible. Now, when I first put this into the calculator, it was way wrong. It said our cost of living was actually going to go down to move to Austin. And I'm just thinking, what in the world? You can't tell me that if I move from Peoria, where I can pick up a house for about $150,000 to $250,000, depending on what I want. A standard average house runs that. In Austin, though, I know we are looking at 600,000 plus at least. And trust me, I'm not an expert there, but I know it's much more expensive. And this is where most calculators fall into this trap, is they're going to weight all of these categories evenly. Or best case scenario, they're going to just use their own weights and they're going to tell you what they are. But here at First Principles, we do that differently. We've got our First Principles default. Housing and shelter, 35% of your annual cost, other services, 30, tangible 25, and primary utilities around 10. So of all your expenditures to keep your household running, this is an estimated breakdown from us. However, we give you the option to equal split. This is going to be a lot like the other calculators on the internet are going to have. They're going to have equal split across everything. It's going to show a very small difference to move to Austin from Peoria. I said, even though the housing cost is more than double in some situations, here, we show 88.8%. So our calculator shows about double. If we now apply our own weighting to this, let's say you spend about 50% on housing and other services you spend 20% on. Tangible goods, you spend about 15% of your expenditures on, and utilities will say 15 as well, because we got to hit that 100% down there. Very important. Otherwise, the weighting doesn't work properly. You math nerds know. So if we plug that in, it's actually a lot more expensive cost of living delta to move to Austin from Peoria. Now let's look at the graphs over here. We've got, it really is just a graphical representation of the numbers up here. You can just very quickly glance and see more expensive, more expensive. That's the average because this top line just pulls it up so far, but everything else is negligibly different, I would argue, compared to the housing. And if you don't weight housing properly, your cost of living is going to be way off. So check out our calculator, plug in your own numbers, custom weighting, and figure out what moves best for you. Now we're going to look at another way to use this calculator, right? We've got moving from area to area is an interesting and tricky game. So I've moved from Eastern Michigan. So let's just say the Detroit metro area, the Detroit, Western, Warren, Dearborn area. I was definitely in the Western Detroit metro area. That I moved to Orange County, California. All right. So I moved from the Detroit area to the Los Angeles area. So we see here, we get a cost of living delta that is 47.7%. That's for this custom we use, even split, we'll show 34%. This is something that me and my coworkers recognized and we weren't thrilled with because our employer offered us a 20% raise to move there. And there was a big discussion over the difference between cost of living, cost of labor. Either way, the math showed we had less money in our pockets. Now, what I was able to do next, after I got that 20% raise, was I moved from Los Angeles back to that Peoria area we were talking about earlier. Right. So Peoria from Los Angeles to Peoria, we had a negative 35.6% change in cost of living. Fairly cheap to live there. So this is actually a little bit cheaper than my initial spot in Detroit to live in. And what was so exciting about that is I was able to keep part of the raise. So even though the money and the vanity metrics and everything else changed and they didn't quite follow the numbers that you might want them to follow, moving from Los Angeles to Peoria with a much smaller reduction in income than this 36.6% allowed me to live a much better lifestyle when I moved there. We were able to own a bigger house. We were able to go out to eat more. And life was just a little easier. California is wonderful. There was not a single bad day of weather there, but it gets stressful. That expense gets stressful at times. So check this out. See how the numbers compare to your situation. Put in your actual weights. Don't weight everything the same like the other sites do. And really analyze what moves make the most sense for you. What market is feasible for you to work in? And does the income that you're being offered in that area make sense? Are you going to live a lower or higher lifestyle than you are now based on where you're going? Every area's got its ups and downs. But at least here we can look at the costs. We'll look at the weather and the amenities with some other tools. However, the numbers don't lie here. You're going to make the best decision for your personal situation. And now you can actually apply the numbers to your situation, to your calculator. You don't have to use the generic calculators anymore. So make the best move for you. Use our site, check out the tools, and make sure you're making the best decision for yourself and your family.